Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp might all be down right now, but who's always here for you? Your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Hello and welcome to episode 846 of the podcast. It's Monday, October 4th, 2021. Today, we continue our election series, focused on the issues our community faces. My guest is Anthony Adams. He's a longtime public servant and now candidate for mayor of the city of Detroit. As I mentioned with the last one we did, I'm not doing endorsements. What I am looking to do is add depth and context to the local races at hand in 2021 to get into the policies and ideas that might push Detroit forward. So much digital ink is spilled and attention spent on what happens in Washington, but what happens and is decided here makes a big difference in our everyday lives. With that, let's just jump into it. This conversation was recorded virtually. My guest today, a candidate for mayor, Anthony Adams. He's a lawyer and has a long career in public service. Adams has been everything from an executive assistant to Mayor Coleman Young, general counsel of the Detroit Board of Education, interim director of the Detroit Water and Sewage Department, to a Detroit Public School Board member and president, to even deputy mayor. Well, now he'd like the big job. Welcome to Daily Detroit, sir.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. All right, so you've got a decent gig. Lawyers generally do well. Being the mayor of a big city is the kind of job where some days even your friends are going to be mad at you. So why are you running?
I'm running because I feel there's a need to really move towards stabilizing our neighborhoods. Downtown is great, things look nice, but when you get deep into the neighborhoods and look at pockets of poverty and the condition that a lot of people in our communities live in, there's a desperate need to shift our focus to neighborhood stabilization. There's also a need to really begin to equalize sort of the taxation of citizens in the city of Detroit. When you look at the amount of overassessment of people, $600 million, and continued overassessment of people at certain levels, there needs to be a level set for that whole adjustment policy. And finally, there clearly needs to be an adjustment in our tax strategy. While we grant tax abatements to billionaires and yet don't provide the same level of benefit for small and local businesses out in the neighborhoods. And then we also have to address the issue of crime and how we police ourselves and how we really get a handle on intervening and reducing crime in our city, which is the direct result of poverty, a lack of education opportunity. So we've got to get a handle on that. And I believe that my well-rounded experience, having worked in both private sector, I worked in government, both the city and the Detroit Board of Education, as well as school board president. I think that gives me a unique perspective on how to create a holistic approach to changing our city.
Well, I've got some questions around pretty much all those areas. I think I want to start with the idea that the city continues to lose population, at least according to the latest census. And a big part of that is the flight of the Black middle class. Data from Bridge shows that Black homeowners are choosing to buy in the suburbs over the city. And honestly, that was not the case before. One of the reasons is because it's expensive to be a Detroiter. I'm a Detroit resident myself. Between taxes, cumulatively, I think we're one of the most taxed cities in the nation. This ties into development. I mean, like as long as I've been alive, it seems like every major project requires some sort of major incentive or deal. What do you think of all that? And what would you do to help attract and keep middle-class people in Detroit?
You hit the nail on the head. And I think there's also another issue tied to that, which is educational equity and the condition of our school systems. And if you're a family with money and you have children, chances are you're going to take your chances in school districts outside of the city of Detroit versus inside. But the whole nature of the taxation policy and the level of assessment that we have in the city is crushing. When you're talking about 72 mills where you can go out to Macomb County, you might be at 35, 40 mills. There's a wide gap in what they're actually assessing people for their property taxes. And there also is a wide gap in the value of housing itself. You know, when you look at the fact that 47% of the people in the city of Detroit actually own their homes, we've become a renter city, which means that a lot of houses are being bought by investors that are driving the prices up. And so you have people with families who are competing against out-of-state investors, which are really driving the price of real estate up and making it unaffordable for people to live in the city of Detroit. And so we've got to begin to correct that imbalance. We've got to get more housing back into the hands of people who actually want to own it. And then we also have to adjust our level of assessment. I've toyed with the idea of probably trying to eliminate property taxation from as a source of revenue for the city. I think when you look at what people cumulatively pay here in the city of Detroit, I think there are some growth strategies that we could adopt by not having a property tax burden that we do, that would free up equity and value in homes, that would provide people with an opportunity to gain wealth and do other things with their money other than pay the city property taxes. And that's something that I'm seriously looking at.
Is the tax system and the cost structure of the city broken? What do you think of all that? And what would you do to help attract and keep the middle class in Detroit?
Well, I think that our tax structure is broken. When you look at how the city collects its revenue, whether it's property tax, income tax, revenue sharing, utility users tax, and service fees that the city collects. Property tax is probably on the lower end of the spectrum, and it's the most burdensome tax for most people who actually live in Detroit and who own a home. And it's also a burden for people who are actually renting homes because they're paying at high tax rates, and we've got to correct that. We're also losing people in part because the educational system is not perceived as something that will attract people to go to Detroit public schools. In the good old days, you could go to pretty much any school and get a decent education. But now when you go to some of our neighborhood schools, it is a challenge that we have to address. And so when you're talking about keeping people who have children in the city, we clearly have to have the ability to keep them in our local school systems, and we got to do some things to correct that. When you also look at the area of the taxation, insurance is still exceptionally high for most Detroiters. When you couple that with high tax rates, high insurance rates, high tax values, people are really being unduly burdened by the cost of actually living in the city. And it's not just at the upper ends of the spectrum, it's also at the lower ends of the spectrum. We find people now moving in communities like East Point, Westland, Taylor, Wayne. That never used to happen in the old days, South Warren. And it's because housing is much cheaper. The cost of living is a lot less, and insurance values are less. And so we've got to begin to correct some of the structural issues which are depriving Detroiters of the opportunity to gain wealth, not to have their income spent on things such as property taxes and insurance, perpetual payment agreements with DTE, perpetual payments plans with the Wayne County Treasurer. We gotta free people up from that so that they can be meaningful citizens in our city.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts around that. Number one, I think a lot of people may not realize that property tax is actually a very small part of the budget compared to everything else in the city. And then number two, anecdotally, and this is totally anecdotal, it seems like that education piece is key, because what I will see happen is somebody will have kids, they'll send their kids to a suburban district, and then what happens within a few years, they end up moving closer to where they're sending their kids to school for a variety, and I mean absolutely eminently practical reasons.
We have a mobility issue in education within the city. When I was general counsel for the school district, I think we had like 250,000 students, 200 schools, and 25,000 employees. Now we have probably more children in charter schools versus public schools. And our charter schools oftentimes aren't on the same page with respect to how they deliver educational services. And so when you get children moving from one charter school to the next, or from charter to a public, that creates a incongruent situation for a child who's trying to learn, because of mobility issues surrounding housing, insecurity in the city, and things of that nature. And if you don't understand that, then you have to craft a system which respects sort of some level of uniformity in the product that is given, so that we can hold people accountable to providing a high education service in the city of Detroit. And by the same token, if we can't break the cycle of increasing the level of home ownership in the city to create more stability for people to live in the city, then we're constantly going to lose population because people who rent really don't have a vested stake in staying anywhere. They're very fungible. It's all a function of price, and I think we got to correct that.
One more point about the schools. As you know, the city is a place where the mayor does not have control over the school district. What could the mayor's office do to help nudge the district in the direction that you're saying?
So what I proposed is the creation of what I call a chief education officer. This is someone whose total responsibility is to advocate for all the children who go to school in the city of Detroit. Since we have a bifurcated system or trifurcated system, because we do have some Catholic schools still left in the city of Detroit, we need a person who's an advocate for all children who can serve as an escape valve for people who really need an outside advocate to push our systems in the right direction. Even though the mayor doesn't have direct controls over the school, but the product that the school system delivers is directly tied to the quality and health and education of the people who actually live in the city of Detroit. And so a mayor must have a role. He must be an advocate. I've got to be the most forceful advocate for people being educated in our city, because if we don't have an educated group of people in our city, we don't have a productive workforce. We don't have people who are knowledgeable and who can take the right steps to move the city forward in the direction. You need people who are informed, people who are educated, people who understand and can reason. And I think part of the impact of the state takeover of Detroit public schools was the diminution of the value of education in our community. And we see that now with people being misled by slick ads, by black money groups that are dark money groups that are impacting exactly what we do in the city of Detroit.
Well, let's pivot topics really quick. I know that listeners care a lot about public transportation. The bus system is in a crisis right now due to a lack of drivers and a bunch of other things. And even before then, neither the city or the region really provided a gold standard of services. And I'm just being kind about it. Just trying to be kind. We all know, and anyone who's taken the bus has known, as listeners will know, I've taken the 9 Jefferson and all that stuff. Like, I grew up on the east side. But many Detroiters need to go to the suburbs for work every day, and it's hard. It's sometimes impossible. There are opt-outs. And this is challenging for people who often have the least resources to deal with anything. How important is mass transit to you, and what are some of your ideas to help fix it? And I know that there's the city system, and then, of course, as we both know, many Detroiters need to get to jobs in the suburbs. How do you help address that?
Well, I think we have to understand that transportation really is about mobility. And I think we have to rethink how we actually move people from point A to point B. You raise an interesting fact that a majority of the people who actually live here work outside the city of Detroit. And so if we understand that and their need to have public transportation, we would craft mobility solutions to how we address those issues. Perhaps we don't need the large rolling stock. We need to have much smaller vehicles operating on a much more on-demand schedule. I think we could utilize technology a lot better in terms of having on-demand service, understanding how we need to shift our rolling stock to accommodate peak hour periods. Because we're never going to break the issue of regional transportation in Detroit, because no one wants to go about the business of creating sort of a tax structure that would allow for sufficient public funding of public transportation. And so I'm of the opinion that we have to have a go it alone strategy. We understand that, and then we shape and use our dollars and commit our money so that people can be provided with the transportation that they need. At the end of the day, these are mobility issues that we've got to address. We've got to figure out where people are, where people need to get, and then how we craft a solution to get them where they need to get, which is in a cost-effective manner that doesn't unduly burden the public, but recognizing that public transportation is a major right that people who don't have vehicles, and the majority of people who actually live in the city of Detroit don't have cars, in part because of the insurance issue, and we've got to provide them with transportation services.
The city's had some real challenges with ethics, as you know, that right now we're down 2 council members because they're guilty of crimes against the people of Detroit.
Yes.
One of the things, though, that I keep hearing as a hesitancy about you as a candidate is you served under former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. How do you answer that particular question? Because that's the one I hear the most of. I like his ideas, this, whatever, but he worked for Kwame. So how do you answer that?
So I answered that by saying that, I think people need to understand how I actually got recruited to work with Kwame Kilpatrick, a person who I really didn't know, to be honest with you. I was recruited by black business people in the city to come join him in his second term to help him stabilize the administration and stabilize the city. When I joined the administration, it pretty much was in free fall because of spending issues and really sort of the structural deficits that exist within the city of Detroit. And so I came on board and really rendered very valuable service and stabilized the city at a time when our mayor was struggling with his issues. And I also add to folk that you never seen me testify at any trial for Kwame Kilpatrick. I was never called to testify for anything, was never implicated in anything. My integrity speaks for itself. And I think it's a little unfair for people to want to tie his issues with me since I wasn't implicated in anything involving his administration. I think I existed before Kwame Kilpatrick and certainly have existed after Kwame Kilpatrick. And so I think people need to judge my record for what it is.
Following up on the ethics thing, though, are there things that the city could do to help keep people's hands out of the cookie jar? Are there things, reforms the city could make so that we don't have these issues with council and the like in the future?
Yeah, the major issue was driving corruption is the ability of private money groups to finance political campaigns. When you have dark money pacts and secret agreements with people and a vendor class that depends on the city for their livelihood, then you're creating an environment for corruption to flourish. I've actually argued hypothetically that we probably should be engaging in public finance of our political process here in the city of Detroit. I think once you begin to remove the dark money packs, the private money, the vendor finance class out of the political world, I think you dramatically reduce the possibility for corruption. And then you have to hire people who have very high ethical standards. Everybody needs to be held accountable because the people in the city demand services that are fair and are not tainted by the influence of money. But then when you look at the corporate class, I mean, people would say, well, hell, they're getting all the benefits. They're getting the tax abatements and tax captures. And I think they shouldn't be financing opposition campaigns for Proposal P and Proposal N, which are direct assault on the democratic process here in the city of Detroit. So I would be advocating for more public finance of elections and campaigns in our city, because I think if you take money out, you at least take one leg of the corruption stool out.
It's interesting to have a focus on kind of like the roots and of the system and what's happening. Why don't we talk about police real quick? Crime is up nationally and in Detroit. You've advocated publicly for programs that rely less on tech and more on people. Why is that, and what does that look like to you?
Because the issue of crime, the underlying issue of why we have high crime is that we have high education and high unemployment in our city. And we have a lot of people at risk who have no hope for any meaningful life in the city of Detroit. And so when you have bad education as a result of state oversight and management of our education system, you have lack of employment opportunities, lack of skills and training in the city. That's a toxic mix for creating a high crime environment. What I've argued is that we've spent more than $3 billion over the last 8 years in fighting crime in the city of Detroit, and crime is at all-time levels, even if you back out the impact of COVID on crime. And so if we need to address the people who are actually committing crimes, why are they committing crimes? Have we ever taken the opportunity to completely inventory people who actually get in trouble? What is their need? What is their educational deficit? What is their skill deficit? If we attack the deficits that these people have and provide them with the opportunity to learn and to grow in their personhood, then I think we can do a much better job of addressing the issue of crime. I've called for what I call euphemistically as the Get Your Shit Together Day. It's a day of general amnesty in the city of Detroit, where people short of rape, robbery, and murder, obviously those crimes we have to address because they go to the very core of a civilized society. What does it take for people to come in one day. We have the prosecutors, we have the judges, we have the social workers, we have the psychologists, we have mental health professionals, we have gang intervention specialists, we have job and employment training specialists there to walk you through what will it take to get you and put your life together, to get your stuff together. Why can we not try something differently? I think that if we do that, if we get 5,000 people to get their lives together, I think that would have a dramatic impact on crime in our community. And what I've also called for is community intervention specialists, people to go out in the community to be much more proactive in dealing with issues and disputes between neighbors. You know, we have a lot of quality of life issues in the neighborhood where people are parking on the front yard. People have their barbecue pits on the front yard. People have trash in yard outside. Why are we not sending people out, not police officers, but community intervention people to talk with people, to address the issues? I was talking to a guy one time. I said, why haven't you cut your grass? And he said, I don't have a lawnmower. Now, I think that was like, wow, it's a revelation there. How many people don't have lawnmowers? If someone's barbecuing on their front porch, why are they doing that? Well, they don't have a back porch. So if you begin to address kind of some of the underlying issues, people not having lawnmowers, people not having back porches, trying to get the culture of the community together, I think we can really create a much better environment for ourselves. But when you don't have a mayor who doesn't understand the connection of these issues and the impact of people in the neighborhoods, then you think of it as a policing issue. More people on the streets, more green light technology, more facial recognition technology, more spot shotter. When the underlying cause of what we need to deal with is a human capital issue and how we help people heal themselves.
And do you think the city has enough resources or can attract enough resources to make a big dent in that? Because the problems you state, I mean, they are in Detroit, but they also plague America.
They do. But when you begin to break down budgets of organizations that actually provide service. So Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network is the agency, a public agency that has more than $800 million in funding that deal directly with mental health issues here in the city of Detroit. I don't believe that they've been held accountable with respect to how they provide their services, nor do I believe that there's been enough coordination of services in the city of Detroit. When you look at the Department of Social Services and their billions of dollars of budgets and resources that they do, they still have a very siloed approach to how they actually deliver what they do. And all I'm suggesting is that the silos have to be broken down so that people understand that all these things are interconnected. My ability to get education training is directly tied to my ability to make sure that my children have a safe environment when I'm in school learning. The ability of my children to have a safe learning school environment provides me with the freedom of mind and the thought necessary to improve the quality of my life. If we have educational deficits for our children, chances are we also have the same thing for their parents. Why are we not looking at the household as a complete family unit to bring them together and provide the family with the services? I believe that the money is there, but how we spend it is very siloed and people are very territorial about their programming. And I think we got to begin to break down those silos if we're going to really attack what we need to attack, which is a human capital issue. I use that term a lot because I believe it's the human capital management of how we help people in our communities make their lives better will allow us to turn the corner on making this city great again.
One of the things that is really interconnected is our water and sewage problems.
Yes.
And
yes.
You were the interim director of DWSD, so you have a unique seat, having seen for a little bit under the hood of maybe what could be done in an interim job. I know there's only so much you can do, but if you were to, be mayor, what are some of the key things to address flooding? Because I was up at Mackinac, I saw Gary Brown go around and talk about, well, only 10% of the city flooded. And in my mind, I went, well, this city, that means like 64,000, 60, whatever. That's a lot of people dealing with floods. That's one way to look at percentages that doesn't necessarily look at like the impact on the ground, knowing how many friends I dealt with, how much flooding I've dealt with. What are some of the things that could be done? Because this is going to be both short-term and long-term, right? Because this kind of stuff usually isn't cheap to redo.
And depends on how you look at it, because my approach is that the whole architecture of how we do infrastructure in our city is absolutely incorrect. having been the director and understand sort of the regional impact of the city, because when I was the director, it was still a regional system, and the city had the ability to impose costs on suburban communities, which they really didn't like, which really was one of the motivating forces behind the creation of the Great Lakes Water Authority, which has shown themselves to be inadequate from a leadership perspective of how they approach the problem. And so part of what I've been advocating on the campaign trail is that we in the city of Detroit have to move towards more green conservation. When you look at how streets are designed in the city with the very high curbs, which force water into the storm system, we got to change that. We have to create more green conservation districts. We have to create more water runoff districts in our community. We have to use our parks, for example, to have stormwater run off into our parks versus into the sewer system. We have to give people credit for building rain gardens on their property. We have to change our intersection design so that we have more bioswales, so that we begin to store water, out of the system. I mean, those are short-term solutions, but I think they also make an impact. We also have to begin much more aggressive maintenance. Part of the issue why the city is flooding in areas where it never flooded is that we have a tremendous number of broken sewer lines in our city. And so if you don't have an aggressive maintenance strategy, which is designed to vacuum suck sewers out, run cameras through to see where the broken sewer connections are, then we're going to continue to have this flooding. It's an episodic issue in some respects, but it's also a much larger issue in terms of how we retain and restore and reservoir water. So we need to begin, for example, to provide businesses that have large parking lots, they need to be building their own retention ponds. We need to give them credit for that. I think if we begin to suck more water and store more water out of the system on a short-term basis, which actually we could pass that cost along to private businesses in the city, that would be given a credit against their drainage fees, which would help them. I think we could do a lot with respect to dealing with the short-term solution. Long-term solution clearly requires that there needs to be more water retention, stormwater retention basins upstream from the city of Detroit, which means that Macomb County and Oakland County in particular, because that's where a lot of the east side flooding water flows down through the Connor Creek to the wastewater treatment plant once it gets down to the river at Connor and Jefferson. They've got to build more retention ponds. They have to, because there's only so much water that the system can hold. And to the extent that we begin to store more water off-site from a regional perspective, I think it reduces the level of flooding in the city of Detroit. So I've offered, I think, a multi-step approach. First, let's deal with the issue of how we change our designs of our streets to force more stormwater runoff. Provide our homeowners with credit for building green water gardens on their property, rain gardens on their property. Provide our businesses with a tax credit for building their own stormwater detention facilities on their property, and then also passing on the cost to our suburban communities to build stormwater retention. That is a workable plan that can be done. But if you don't understand the system, you can't do that, because you're still fixed with the idea that you can handle this in an isolated manner, and you really can't.
One of the things about Mother Nature is it does not care about city borders.
That's correct.
All right. So before I let you go, I like to ask a question that kind of pushes the window a little bit, makes people think. One of the policies I've seen you share on social media and have support for is universal basic income, or UBI.
Yeah.
Why? And what could that look like in Detroit? Because I think that's something that's unique that I have not seen in the conversation, yet I know among our listeners, they discuss it often.
Well, I think that it's a major point to how we move people forward in the community. For example, when we talk about the issue of crime and the lack of opportunity, one of the reasons is that people who have low skills and low education have to have an ability to earn money and to make money. And so by providing a universal basic income, coupled with training programs, educational programs, this is not me just providing you with a check to do what you want to do. It's really me providing you with a carrot that allows you to change and transform your life. I think when you look at, again, the amount of money that's spent in social service and recognizing the fact that more than 70% of the people who actually live in the city of Detroit receive some type of transfer payment from some type of governmental agency or a pension, it certainly seems to make sense that if you're looking at providing equitable income across the board, that we have the resources within the system. See, I think, again, I go back to this point. There is a lot of money that's in the system, but how it's spent, from my perspective, is not in the right way. And I think we can create a universal basic income model to provide people with that basic income to allow them to move their life forward in a much more robust manner.
Well, Anthony Adams, I appreciate your time. Anthony Adams is running to be mayor of the great city of Detroit. If people want to know more, where can they go?
They can go to Anthony Adams for Mayor, FORmayor.com. That's my website. I have an Instagram, AA4Mayor, Instagram, Twitter, very, very active on those accounts. And you can come by my headquarters at 19512 Livernois, and I'm usually here in the morning before I hit the trail.
Couple of quick things. As I said on the last one, if you are a candidate or work with one for something local and want to chat, reach out, dailydetroit@gmail.com. And of course, thanks to our members on Patreon who make this possible. I'll do some shout outs this week, but already thanks to Steve, Dion, and James. You all are awesome, and it makes a huge difference. If you want to be excellent like them, consider joining us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thanks for listening. However you decide to vote, I hope you learned something today. Take care of each other, and I'll see you around Detroit.